All right, Peter, thank you very much. Take some deep breaths. I know it was a bit of an experience getting everything up and working, mate. So a bit of a background for Peter, everyone. He's Managing Consultant for Transport for London, known as TfL. He has over 15 years experience in delivering a wide range of freight and construction logistics policies, programs and projects. These include things like the leading international award-winning CLOCS program, the Fleet Operator Recognition Scheme, construction logistics program. And prior to working at TfL, Peter worked for the logistics consultant AECOM, ARUP, and he was also policy manager at the Freight Transport Association. And he's also a lovely guy to have a beer with when you're over in the UK, if you're ever lucky, once we get out of COVID. So I'll owe you a couple, Peter.
Thank you. Thank you, Jerome, and many apologies for the technical issues this morning. Probably human error more than technical error, so I do apologise for that, but thank you very much for the introduction, and thanks very much for introducing me and bringing me onto this fantastic meeting that you've got going this morning. As Jerome said, my name is Peter Binham, and I work for Transport for London. I've been at TfL now for around 10 years. I work in TfL International Consulting, which is a new department within Transport for London, and it's been created last year really to allow TfL to start sharing our expertise, technology, and insight with other transport authorities and interested parties around the globe. So it's been perfect timing. Today I'm going to be talking to you briefly, just give you an overview of freight in London. It's very similar in many ways to freight in urban areas, but has specific challenges, just like any area. Then I'm going to be talking to you about CLOCS, the Construction Logistics and Community Safety Programme, which was launched in London, now rolling out into Australia, which is brilliant. I want to talk why we established it, given the reasons for, talk about its contribution to improving vehicle safety and enabling safer vehicles, how CLOCS ultimately standardised and professionalised construction logistics and the huge strides it's made in the UK, as well as improving operating standards. It has a whole range of outputs which I want to go through. I'll give a brief overview, only a minute of each of these. If anyone has any questions following this presentation, please feel free to get in contact, because they're quite chunky subjects in their own right. And then finally, I just want to share the results, how CLOCS has affected construction logistics in the UK, and some of the lessons learned. And then I should have 5 minutes at the end for some questions. So just to start, freight in London, like any urban area, is very important. It's the lifeblood of the economy. I'm from the freight industry myself, so I do empathise with the freight industry and understand the value it brings to a modern city. It does bring about half of household goods do come on the back of a lorry. And however, although it is the lifeblood of the economy, it does have some negative externalities or negative issues which need to be addressed and managed. Those being primarily safety issues, being involved in incidents, environmental issues due to poor air quality, and congestion, how it congests London road network. Now, I was quite glad I managed to pick up the end of John Lamont's presentation, understanding the type of operators you're working with. Now, within London, we are very similar. The freight industry in the UK, although it has some very large players and some names which everyone will know, it does have a lot of small operators as well. By understanding the industry you're trying to influence really allows you to understand the levers that you need to pull. So understanding that these operators generally work on profit margins of around 4% means that you really need to be sensitive of any changes that you bring to them. However, that also brings an opportunity by utilising procurement to allow operators to start competing on quality and not cost. But just understanding the market you're trying to target, the size of operator, because they may not have the available technology, although I can't really speak, or necessarily have the time to implement interventions. So going back to the start of CLOCS, this is where CLOCS started. It started in 2011 in London. In 2011 in London, it was quite a different place. We ended up having 3 fatalities in 1 week. As you can see at the bottom, we had 13 fatalities there were 6 fatalities, sorry, within 13 days. It became front page news. It was always on the Evening Standard. It was always being reported, a number of incidents involving HGVs and cyclists. And very similar to Australia, HGVs represent around about 4% of London's road miles. However, they were involved in 20% of pedestrian fatalities and 78% of cyclist fatalities. So they were disproportionately representative in these incidents. As a result of this, the commissioner at the time, Sir Peter Hendy, called on the freight team within TfL to investigate why this was happening. He said, this cannot happen again. We need to understand why it's primarily construction vehicles, and we need to address and do something about it. And from that was ultimately the seed of CLOCS. Now, following that intervention by the commissioner, in 2012, we commissioned TRL, a Transport Research Laboratory, to undertake some research to understand why construction vehicles were involved in a disproportionate amount of fatalities. And it came up with some key findings, which really helped us to develop the CLOCS programme. First was work-related road risk is not taken as importantly off-site as it is on-site. There was a lack of awareness of road risk. Blind spots, it was quite an interesting find that construction vehicles can have a 50% greater blind spot, specifically the tipper. Construction vehicles are involved in disproportionately high amounts of fatalities, and importantly, the collision data is lacking. No one is recording the collisions on the road network, and therefore it's never really being investigated. Now, the evidence for change, this really provided us with an evidence for change. It showcased that there was a problem in the industry that needs to be addressed, and therefore it came up with some key recommendations. The first one being a nationally recognised standard on work-related road risk. Secondly, vehicle manufacturers should work to improve vehicle design to make them fit for purpose for the environment they're working in. Thirdly, blind spots need to be better understood. And fourthly, these issues need to be addressed from stakeholders across the whole of the industry. And that's really important all the way through here. Everything we do with regards to CLOCS and Fords is all being industry-led. And you'll notice that a lot of the branding with regards to CLOCS doesn't have TfL on it. And that's been done on purpose, and that's to give ownership to the industry. So following that report, it was decided that we needed to follow the publication of that report. In 2013, the Commissioner of TfL invited senior representatives personally via a letter to attend a meeting to highlight these issues. At this meeting, the risk was highlighted and a real call to arms for the industry to come together to address this problem, to come behind a single scheme to develop to improve safety in this area. It really did gain buy-in, and getting all the senior representatives around the table early on to get their buy-in and support was really key to our success. As well as those initial meetings, we started to engage extensively with the industry, the whole and the entirety of the industry, from contractors through to logistics operators, through to vehicle manufacturers, engaging with this entire supply chain, getting them to take ownership under the umbrella of CLOCS, very similar to, again, what John was saying with regards to you're already doing a lot of these things with it, you just need to put it under the umbrella. That's what CLOCS did. CLOCS created the umbrella for all these organisations to come together to really take ownership and run with the programme. From a TfL perspective, although we established CLOCS, we really didn't want to be dictating the way CLOCS went. We were designed there to help facilitate discussion and not dictate discussion. CLOCS itself has three key work streams, really to address those concerns and those findings from the report. First of all was to improve vehicle safety through manufacturing design. The second was to address the safety imbalance. And thirdly was to encourage a best practice within construction logistics. This was all shaped and driven by the CLOCS working groups. Today we have around about 350 CLOCS champions, all helping us to drive and shape the scheme. Now I'm just going to give you an overview of some of the key outputs of these work streams. Again, I could go into a lot more detail, but for time reasons, obviously won't. The first output of significance for CLOCS is the CLOCS Standard. Now the CLOCS Standard was addressing the issue of there being multiple competing standards. So the CLOCS Standard was developed and pulled together 11 different standards into one. So by working with organisations, we identified those 11 different standards and found common ground across the board. Now, what the CLOCS Standard aims to do is it aims to ensure the safest construction vehicle journeys are made, and there's zero collisions. And the CLOCS Standard has actions and duties on the entirety of the supply chain, from regulators to clients to operators. Now, the CLOCS Standard is that consistent approach to construction logistics, which the industry have been trying to find. And there's three key streams, really, that run through this standard itself, again, with different requirements on those different stakeholders. Is first of all, construction logistics planning. Secondly, operator standards. And thirdly, monitoring enforcement. And this is really the heartbeat or the DNA of the CLOCS standard. So just starting with construction logistics planning. CLOCS mandates construction logistics plan. Now, construction logistics plan is designed to allow you to predict or highlight what issues are likely to come from a construction site as a result of the vehicle servicing it. It's supposed to predict that impact and help you develop planned measures to address those concerns. Importantly, it does form part of some planning authorities as a requirement, but what it's really done is for the first time it's standardised an approach to construction logistics. It's allowed all those in construction logistics to now follow the same consistent process. It standardises a commitment to plan measures. So it says at this early stage that you should commit to be proposed or consider adopting a plan measure within your supply chain. That could include a delivery scheduling system, or it could be investigating freight by water. But what it really does is it makes people think at an early stage of what that likely impact will be on the community and proactively address it rather than waiting for a problem to happen. The construction logistics plan also allows people to submit data consistently, as well as the consistent phases and consistent requirements. Now, the requirements is on impact, due to the impact on the community, rather than just size on its own. But what this is all doing is starting to professionalise construction logistics. So people approving construction logistics are now seeing CLPs in a consistent format. They're getting consistent data. And they can now all of a sudden, with that consistent data, analyse the likely impact of at programme level rather than just individual projects. CLOCS itself was quite fortunate that there was a ready-made established fleet accreditation scheme available to pair up with or to recognise, and that being FORS, the Fleet Operator Recognition Scheme. FORS is a quality standard that operators meeting the CLOCS standard must meet, and FORS was created in 2007, is now an international scheme. It's aimed to improve safety, efficiency and environmental protection. And now CLOCS do sit on the governance group of this to help shape the standard itself. The requirements within CLOCS for vehicles are embedded within FORS, as I said, and those requirements include things like additional safety equipment. So FORS has mandated the Class 6 mirror, the underrun, the cameras, and so on and so forth since about 2012. Also mandates additional policies and procedures and environmental training, but it really covers the key main areas of any transport operation, that being management, vehicle drivers and operations. By having FORS as that ready-made mechanism allowed CLOCS to automatically recognise a standard which had a critical mass. Importantly, the FORS standard mandates mandates driver training, which is really important. Within the UK, we do have a legal requirement to undergo progressive training as a driver, but the requirements are quite flexible. Therefore, within FORS mandates that drivers will go on a bike every 5 years. So very similar to your sharing road safely scheme in Australia. FORS has been running safe urban driver training now for around about 8 years, and has put about 140,000 people on bikes as a result of it. As a result of mandating these standards, we have around about 340,000 e-learning modules completed. But all this is embedded within the FORS standard, and it allows CLOCS to easily recognise one common standard. CLOCS does say that it will recognise equivalent standards, and that is for clients to recognise within their own risk and supply chain. How big is FORS? It's pretty big. It's a chunky organisation now. It has around 5,000 accredited operators across 17 countries. And the reason we have this extensive supply chain is because the construction supply chain in the UK is international. We may be receiving glass from Italy or sand from Turkey, and therefore FORS has the ability to undertake audits across the whole supply chain and across the whole of the UK and Europe. Why is it recognised FORS? Well, FORS, as I said, was established. It was the first fleet accreditation scheme in the UK, but it's proven to make a difference and improve safety, reduce environmental impact, and really be a cause for good. Another output within CLOCS was the need for monitoring and reporting and enforcing of CLOCS. CLOCS itself has now created site reviews, so it is asking CLOCS champions, clients and developers to now self-assess themselves. So we want them to self-assess the construction site itself, the construction logistics plan, as well as take on professional independent audits through the considerate contractors to ensure that that CLOCS standard is being met. CLOCS had also developed a VOX to allow suppliers and fleet operators to report non-compliance back to the site manager or to the contractor, and also develops gate checks, so consistent gate checks that people can, as vehicles approach the site, there is a consistent approach to checking and validating that vehicle meets the requirements. CLOCS is also to address the safety imbalance between work-related road safety. As I said at the beginning, if there was an incident on a construction site, it was often reported through REDOR, through the health and safety executive. However, once that vehicle left site and there was an incident, there wasn't necessarily a protocol for reporting minor incidents. Therefore, CLOCS has now developed a repository which allows operators, enforcement bodies, and road safety groups to input information on incidents. Those incidents are then, there's an output, those are recorded, they can be analysed and they can be investigated, but it does send alerts out to the whole of the industry. So we're creating transparency to the amount of road risk on the network. We're not just relying on the news network, we're going directly now to operators and to the industry to highlight incidents as and when they happen. We've also developed a construction logistics qualification. It was apparent that there was no consistent approach to construction logistics. So to assist with the construction logistics planning, we developed a qualification, which is now a recognised short course through the Chartered Institute of Logistics and Transport. This course is aimed to enhance and create competency within construction logistics, to create a standardised approach to construction logistics and planning, and it's been hugely successful. And to date, we've had around about 350 people attain practitioner status, which is now a way of evidencing competency through the CLP. CLOCS has also been very active, and this has been sort of the media side, has been very active in engaging with vehicle manufacturers. Back in 2015, as part of the CLOCS initiative, we took an operator delegation out to vehicle manufacturers in Europe to say to them that there was a demand for high vision trucks. This was a really brave step, but was very successful, to say that there was an industry. People wanted a vehicle that they could see out of properly and was fit for purpose. These operators wanted to give their drivers the best chance possible to see the vulnerable roadies around them. CLOCS also encouraged the fitment of equipment, and that's been through FORS. And it's also commissioned research to really greater understand blind spots, and there's lobbied for change at the European regulation. London doesn't want to be doing anything on their own. We are reliant on European legislation or regulations for our vehicles. Therefore, we have been in parallel lobbying the European Union to make changes to vehicle design. As part of the research we have undertaken, we wanted to prove the value, and this is really where the legacy of CLOCS comes from. We understood that there was a problem with blind spots, but we didn't really understand what that problem was until we started to investigate the value of direct vision. Now, we've undertaken research through universities to prove that direct vision does improve response times, it does reduce the chance of a collision, and it is very important. Now, direct vision isn't the only answer. It obviously can be a safe system approach, but you can't really argue against the value of direct vision, of allowing the drivers to make eye contact, potentially create empathy with that cyclist, but importantly, see the person around the vehicle. As a result of this, we also undertook some DVS measurements. So we undertook, through some research groups, to analyse the 3D volume of space around all vehicles or HGVs, to see what that blind spot level was, and started to create a grading system to see which vehicles had the greatest blind spots compared to the greatest vision. As a result of that, we have now introduced, or soon to go live with, our HGV safety permit scheme. This is a world-leading scheme which is going to ban or restrict certain vehicles from London from March 2021, dependent on their vision. Now, each vehicle will be graded between 0 stars and 5. Those vehicles that are 0 stars will be banned unless they can evidence a safe system. I'm not going to go into too much detail about this. This is obviously world leading and changing all the time. It has been delayed due to COVID. However, we do plan to launch this in March 2021 and then enhance it again in 2024. So again, bring people on that journey with us. And that's really important with improving of standard, bring people on that journey. As I said, we are aware that direct vision isn't the only answer. There's multiple technology out there, and evolving technology as well, that can address the issue of the blind spot. Therefore, the DVS does recognise a progressive safe system and is being continually reviewed until 2024, when the new standard will be released. So there's a really quick overview of CLOCS, the challenges we had and some of the key outputs. I think you'll see, CLOCS has been world leading. The advances in construction logistics planning, qualifications, and standards has been recognised worldwide as leading. And as a result of that, we've been fortunate to be successful in many awards on the back of the CLOCS programme, from recognition from the European Union through to recognition and winning the prestigious Premier Prince Michael of Kent Road Safety Award in 2016. We've also now received recognition from the Department for Business, who are happy to endorse the CLOCS standard, which is a fantastic step from central government to start recognising a standard which goes above and beyond the legal minimum. But importantly, CLOCS does, and the reason for CLOCS is to improve safety. We do have evidence now to show that there is a 47% reduction in casualty rates when implementing CLOCS. And there's 37% less complaints. So the community is happy, the impact on the community is reduced, and therefore less complaints are being received. Now I just want to share with you, just to summarise or to finish, 4 key points or 4 takeaways as you go on your journey of rolling CLOCS out across Australia. The first one is industry wants one standard. John Lamont mentioned it earlier about bringing it under an umbrella, about everyone doing the right thing. The one thing industry don't want is different standards from Melbourne to Sydney. They don't want different standards from South Melbourne to North Melbourne. They want one common standard that they can all work to. It allows people to understand that they only need the one badge or one accreditation, but getting behind that one standard is really important. And that standard, again, you'll notice, and I said it before, TfL took our logo off to give industry ownership of that standard. A lot of transport authorities would want to put their logo on something to claim credit. We're very much about, yeah, TfL can offer value. However, it does put people off other transport authorities, primarily as and when it has one specific logo on it. Second of all is to engage with the whole supply chain. The success of CLOCS can be largely attributed to getting the right people around the table. It's getting the buy-in from clients, site main contractors, all the way through to HGV operators. Not missing out any of that supply chain is vitally important, because the whole supply chain has a responsibility to improve road safety. The third one, which we've noticed, and I think TfL have used really well over the last decade, is the power of procurement. Using contract and procurement as leverage is the greatest leverage you can have. Allowing operators to compete on quality and not just cost, a race to the top and not a race to the bottom, is really a way of improving safety. And it's amazing what people will agree to before signing a contract to what they'll agree to after signing the contract. So I highly recommend utilising that leverage at procurement to get people to think again and do the right thing. Fourthly, and just coming to an end, to lead by example. Within TfL, we cannot encourage other people to improve their work-related road risk unless we're willing to do it ourselves. Therefore, in 2012, we introduced work-related road risk into our contractual requirements. You're not able to work on behalf of TfL on a construction project unless you meet that CLOCS standard. So leading from the front is really important. Practice what you preach and bring people on that journey with you. There's a real quick fly-through of CLOCS. Hopefully that was useful. I think I've got some time for some questions, Jerome, if that's okay.
Oh, most certainly. That was spectacular. I know it's the wee hours of the morning over there, so you're certainly sharp and on point. And we do have the other webinars which we've done on the CLOCS and the fours, if you want to understand in more detail, which goes a bit more of a relaxed pace, over an hour for each one of the discussions. So I guess as a first sort of question, and there's a couple that are coming around this, Peter, has there been any peer-reviewed independent evaluation of the efficacy of the elements of CLOCS system as a whole, and how that sort of had an impact?
So we've had reviews submitted from CLOCS champions, as well as working with local planning authorities. So a lot of the local planning authorities have shared information with us on complaints and road incidents. Therefore, we've been able to compare like with like. We still require some additional work, of course. We have independent research on the fleet accreditation standards to show that those improve difference, and I shared those earlier. We do require some more work to be done on the improvement of CLOCS, but we do have evidence to show it's making that difference.
There's a question here from Thomas, just looking for a bit of a clarification. It sounds like CLOCS is on the brink of becoming legislated standard, at least within the UK. How confident are you this will take place on board in the broader European community as well?
No, I don't. I would like to think it would be, but I don't think it will become legislation. The start of CLOCS has led to DVS, which again is a London-specific piece of legislation and will be changing European-wide standards on vehicles. The construction logistics plan requirement isn't mandated in local planning authorities either. It is something which we would like to encourage, but no, it's very much not part of legislation. If it becomes part of legislation, there would be no need for this standard itself because it would be the law.
Yeah, great answer. Was there much financial investment to come on board, and does it matter by the size of the organisation as well?
There's discounts for charities and small operators. It works for operators now to sign up as a CLOCS champion. It costs £600. It's not a huge investment. We're also quite fortunate that we're now receiving some additional funding from other local planning authorities. We're hoping that next year CLOCS will be a sustainable business model. And that's really important from a local planning authority's point of view to ensure it can stand on its own 2 feet. And we believe next year that commercially it will be standing on its own 2 feet.
And how rigorous is, I guess, the certification auditing process as well, just to give us some sort of context?
It started off with a light touch. Again, it's about bringing people onto that journey with you. Initially, it was very much voluntary, and we're starting to tighten up that ratchet as we speak. So the actual requirement is an independent auditor comes on, has a look at your site access, has a look at the construction logistics plan to see how it's being implemented, and then feeds back to you on how you can improve in those areas. It is rigorous. We do embed it within the CLOCS standard, and that CLOCS standard does evolve every 2 years. So something which we will be continuing to kind of turn that handle.
So when you say that, turn the handle, because there's a question here, I guess, around that legacy. Does that mean you're sort of creating a bit of a pipeline so people can see what vehicles, what the standards are coming down that they need to move forward and adapt towards?
Yeah, I mean, industry needs as much warning as possible for any changes in vehicle design or standards or safe systems. We're very much keen about allowing operators to make informed decisions, especially at procurement stage or buying vehicles. So yeah, we need to give people as much notice as possible of that.
And just because you had the image around the direct vision, there's a question from Merv. So what do you sort of think around the American-style bonneted vehicles moving through the urban streets?
With a safe system imposed on it, it can be done safely. It may not be an ideal vehicle for the urban area. However, changes to the vehicle design through a safe system, additional driver training, and correct routing should ideally minimise risk. We do have, I think we call them juggernauts in the UK. We do have juggernauts or long noses in the UK, but not generally in central London, just because our road network is ancient and narrow.
That's fantastic. And last question here. Got some good feedback saying how excellent your presentation's been, so thank you again. In building and looking at the culture of drivers, have you seen quite a change in how they've been engaging with the program over time? And they've been more open to the systems of CLOCS?
Yeah, I think the change in attitude of drivers has been huge. The biggest winner, the biggest success of that was getting them onto bikes. For a long time, we could not get the two road users to talk. We couldn't get them to sit in each other's seats. But as soon as we launched Safe Urban Driver Training, we got drivers on bikes and allow them to feel what it's like to be vulnerable, to cycle around big vehicles, to see what it's like in someone else's shoes. That has probably been the biggest change of driver behaviour we've had. And I would highly recommend anyone that hasn't been on a bike, including those within local planning authorities in Australia and the like, I encourage you to get onto a safe urban driving course or similar in Australia to see what it's like to actually be a vulnerable road user in an urban area.
Great. Thank you, Peter. I might just squeeze one more in before we move across to Scott. And since we're understanding that many truck movements are done by subcontractors, owner drivers, in your program, how do you sort of manage that relationship expectation of with regards to that subgroup in regards to investments in equipment?
Yeah, that's a really good question. We have the same in the UK. We have very much a subcontractor culture. The thing with, we can understand why that's there. However, the issue we have with the subcontractor culture is often risk is passed down the supply chain. It may be driving around in that vehicle's load, with that vehicle delivery on it, in their uniform, carrying their load. However, when there's an incident, that vehicle does not work for that company, and everyone washes their hands of it. Within CLOCS, and specifically through FORS, we mandate that these standards are passed down through the supply chain. It can't just be tier one contractors responsible for safety. It needs to be passed down. And it's completely unacceptable in this day and age for someone to wash their hands of taking responsibility of an incident just because it's uncomfortable. They put that vehicle on the road ultimately, that they've employed the driver and they're making profit on it. They need to take responsibility for that vehicle, even if it is a subcontractor working on their supply chain.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for your time today, Peter. And thank you also for holding through to the end. We have some more questions coming through which we can touch on. And I hope you can sit down and enjoy hearing from Scott and Marilyn now. And make sure you have a bit of a coffee to keep you going.